In the next edition of It's About Money, we'll be talking with Deborah L Hughes, Executive Director of the Susan B. Anthony House, and our topic is A Purse with a Purpose. Hope you can join us. Hello and welcome to another edition of It's About Money. I'm Nannette Nocon and thank you for joining us. Today we have a really fun program. We're talking about a purse with a purpose. And my guest is Deborah L Hughes, who is the Executive Director of the Susan B. Anthony House. Thank you for being here, Deborah.
It's wonderful to be here, Nannette. Thank you.
So Susan B. Anthony has that famous quote that every woman must have a purse of her own. What did she mean by that?
Well, in our time, we might think of that as the opportunity to have a pretty bag or something that's a beautiful accessory. In her time, women who were married actually couldn't open a bank account, and any currency that they were given had to be handed over to their husbands. So for her, it was really saying that a woman had a right to have independence, and the purse represented her own income, her own living. It represents something very, very powerful from the 19th century, that every woman should be able to have her own bank account and make her own decisions. I
see. Wow, that's amazing. I can't imagine not being able to have my own money at this time in our generation, to have our own ability to have our own, purse as such, and our own money. So it's a lot more meaningful than just the purse today of having our own wallet or purse itself. So her cause is relevant then, but it also is relevant today in a different way. That women should be independent on their own, take the next step, right?
Exactly. Women have come a long way. I remember in my early years right out of college, it was hard for a woman to get a credit card in their own name. It was very hard to get a car salesperson to take you seriously. But in Susan B. Anthony's time, it really was, a woman couldn't legally rent a room or an apartment or enter into a contract.
Wow, amazing. She did some really amazing things then. Now, many people don't know that Susan B. Anthony lived here in Rochester. And would you talk about the house that she lived in and the significance of that being in Rochester?
She lived at the house on 17 Madison Street for 40 years, from the time when her mother actually purchased the house in 1866, and then Susan B. Anthony died there 40 years later in 1906. And she traveled all the time, working for the cause, but it was her home base. And Mary actually bought the house. Mary was Susan's sister. Okay. Bought the house from her mother as Lucy aged, and that was really the place that Susan considered home. And one of the very exciting parts of the history was in the 1890s. The National American Woman Suffrage Association had their headquarters right there in the house. Susan was president then. Oh. So they were trying to get Western states that were coming into the United States to come in as suffrage states that allowed women to vote. And they were also pushing for a national constitutional amendment to give women the right to vote. And all that activity happened right on Madison Street, right here in Rochester.
Oh, exciting stuff.
Yeah. So for people who were for suffrage all around the country, they knew about Rochester and about Madison Street and about the house. And we can see that in letters and references, that Madison Street was this special place where all this activity was happening. They actually added the third floor of the house in the 1890s because they didn't have enough room for the work they were doing.
Oh my goodness.
So there were women upstairs being stenographers, working on the petitions, doing all of the organizing for all the campaigns all around the country. They said something like 2 bushels of mail would go up the stairs every day to Susan B. Anthony's office.
Oh my goodness.
And so the house, you can still feel that energy. It's a very exciting place to be.
That's great. Now, for someone who's young, who may not have heard of Susan B. Anthony, what was her cause? You've mentioned suffrage, but tell us a little bit more about her cause.
People usually do know about suffrage. That's the one, the nickname for the 19th Amendment to the Constitution is the Susan B. Anthony Amendment, because it granted women the right to vote. But she was a reformer in lots of different ways. Her first cause was actually temperance, the idea to encourage social reform so that people wouldn't drink so heavily. And that goes back to the condition for women in the 19th century. In this country, currency wasn't readily available, and often workers were paid with whiskey or with rum. And that led to a lot of addiction. People died of cirrhosis of the liver in their 30s in the 19th century.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and if you had workers on the canal, if you paid them in drink at the end of the day, there was a good chance they'd fall asleep and be there in the morning. But it also meant that there was a huge problem.
Sure.
Since a woman didn't have custody of children, they were considered to be the husband's. She couldn't rent an apartment. She couldn't have a job of her own. Really, the only two things that a married woman could do would be to take in sewing or take in laundry. If you were in a marriage where your husband was a drunk, it was an untenable situation. You couldn't leave. If you left, you had to leave your children behind. And even in the 1830s and 40s, slavery was still legal in a lot of the country, and indentured servitude was also legal. And so a man could sell his children into labor to pay for his bar bill.
Oh my gosh, we've come a long way.
Yeah.
Although some people, I'm sure, can kid about it.
Yeah, but that's, yeah. So Susan B. Anthony was outraged that women and children were caught in that position. And so her first really big cause was temperance. But it was temperance that radicalized her about women's issues.
I see.
If you can imagine the 19th century, a woman couldn't preside over a meeting if men were delegates. A man had to preside. So they went to a joint meeting of the Daughters of Temperance and the Sons of Temperance, and Susan B. Anthony stood up because she wanted to make a motion from the floor. And they said, the women are here to listen and learn. So she walked out, and she decided that women needed to have be able to participate.
Right, right.
So then she was a teacher. It was true in the educational union as well. Women were the majority of the teachers. You had to be single then to teach. As soon as you got married, you had to leave your job because a married woman couldn't hold a position. But the men who were in the teachers union could vote and pass all the policy, but the women were not allowed to vote in the union. And Susan B. Anthony delivered a wonderful speech about that, where she basically said, men who are teachers, if you want to get the respect for this profession, then you should acknowledge that the women who are doing it are worthy of respect. But then her next very important cause was abolition. In the 1850s, she traveled throughout all of New York State, went to every county, sometimes by sleigh, because that was the mode of transportation in the winter, to talk about ending slavery and how critically important that was.
I see. So there's temperance and abolition, and then she went into suffrage.
Yes.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize all those things that Susan B. Anthony had done.
Yeah, she was a great reformer, all across the board.
Wow, how inspiring to hear that.
Yeah.
One woman accomplishing so many things.
Tremendous passion for human rights.
Right, yeah, I can see that. That's wonderful. Now, right now, what kind of support do men and women and men, I should say, give to the house? I mean, what's the reaction of people to say, well, here's Susan B. Anthony's house. What does it stand for, and what kind of support have you received from the community locally and elsewhere?
The house is a National Historic Landmark. There are about 80,000 sites on the National Registry of Historic Places. Only 3% can qualify as National Historic Landmarks. So if you have a famous person like Susan B. Anthony, you have to be the one place that best represents the work that changed the world or affected the country. And so in 1965, they determined the house on Madison Street was that one place that could represent this woman who traveled everywhere and could really tell her story the best. People sometimes think that that standing of a National Historic Landmark comes with federal funding or underwriting, and it doesn't. We're an independent nonprofit, actually started in 1945, so we're 65 years old. We get earned revenue from admissions and program fees and the museum shop for about 1/4 of our budget, and the other 3/4 of our budget comes from donations and memberships.
I see.
So it's all community support and membership support, which actually we have members from outside the country and across the country.
Yeah, well, she's known around the world, I mean, because it's so meaningful, you know, what she had done. And this is the suffrage part of it, you know, so that's great. Now, I know that you're trying to have a big fundraiser, and that's one of the reasons why I invited you to come here, is to talk about this Purse with a Purpose, which I thought is so intriguing. So tell us about what this fundraiser that launched in the fall of 2010 is all about.
Yes. Well, you know, we do get some state support, but we all know about the New York State budget, and Rochester's nonprofits are all competing for the same dollars, so it's a particularly challenging time. So our Board of Trustees said, what could we do to help close the budget gap that's related to the economy right now? And they came up with an idea that we've floated for a while. What if we could make a modern version of Susan B. Anthony's famous trademark alligator purse? And we thought that we might go to a national bag manufacturer like Coach or Kohan or someplace. But it would take a couple years to really negotiate the licensing and get that off the board. So one of our trustees, Peggy Hubbard, contacted Gail Riggs. Gail's a local philanthropist in town and who actually has her PhD in psychology, but who has made these marvelous one-of-a-kind handbags. She usually makes the handbag, and she does it with her children, with Abigail and John, and they then, the nonprofits auction those handbags to support the organization. So Peggy said, Gail, would you consider designing for us a modern version of Susan B. Anthony's bag that we could market as a fundraiser? And Gail spent, I don't know how many hours over the summer coming up with a marvelous design. And then came to us and said, here's the design, and she names all her bags. So this is Ms. Anthony, designed by the Abigail Riggs collection, and said, if you raise the money to manufacture the bags, the design is yours, and you can have all the return for the house.
Oh, how nice.
Yes, it was absolutely marvelous.
That's brilliant. So may I ask how much money it takes to manufacture the bag?
We had to raise $45,000, and we approached, it was all women who provided the support and the underwriting of this. We have a number of women who are donors who, some we've called angels, some want to be called bag ladies, who are marvelous underwriters. And it was 14 women altogether who helped us raise the $45,000.
I see.
So we were able to say, okay, we can do the manufacturing.
I see. So then raise the $45,000, the money's there, and whatever, all the proceeds of the bag then is available for to meet the gap of the budget.
Exactly, yes, 100% of what people pay for the bag, except for the part that goes to New York State for taxes,
Oh, sure.
Supports the Susan B. Anthony House.
I see. And you've had also a number of donated services and items for it, like comes in a wonderful packaging.
It's been so marvelous to see how people have decided to participate in this project. It's been absolutely incredible community support. The packaging is this beautiful box, which was designed by Peggy Felt of Design Essence, and she donated her time to do this. We were thrilled when Diamond Packaging, which is a woman-owned business, said that they would give us this, they custom designed the shape of the box, and they did all of the printing, and produced this beautiful package for us. And it's fun because it tells more of the story of the box. It tells a little bit about the Susan B. Anthony House, because many people are buying the bags and giving them as gifts. So the person getting the bag might not know anything about Susan B. Anthony or about this particular person, why it's so significant. The box tells part of the story. And then inside each bag we also have a DVD, and we got a grant to produce a DVD about the project that tells a little bit too, and it's very, it's a powerful DVD. It ends up with women from around the world saying, "Thank you, Susan."
Oh,
And
nice.
it's a treasure and a part of the bag itself.
So you're producing how many bags in total?
It's 2,000 bags. They're a limited edition. Each one is numbered individually, and so they're a collector's item. And it's a beautiful bag. So
Sure. And it's the kind of bag that people can order by going to the Susan B. Anthony House.
Exactly.
So it truly is a purse with a purpose, doing its thing to meet the raising money.
Right, and the purse with the purpose was really the Abigail Riggs collection's idea to say that.
I see. Very nice. You have to have some marketing ideas to come along with it.
We do. We had a marvelous, successful launch of the purse locally, where we sold out of the first 200 bags that we had in one day. People were thrilled, and people who had purchased one bag and came to our event, Nancy Mann and Mann's Jewelers did this marvelous reception for us, came in to pick up their one bag and often walked out the door with 3 or 4 more as gifts and presents for people.
So we'll be seeing a lot of people in the community carrying a similar purse.
A lot of people will have Miss Anthony, but you can ask. I ran into a woman recently whose mother was carrying number 173, which is very excited to have 173. I personally have 24, and you have number 7.
Yeah, right. That's right. So we have all these numbers.
So we'll have our individual particular bag.
Yeah, so when we ask, what number are you?
Yes.
So that's fantastic. So 2,000 bags from a design that was created from an artifact that the Susan B. Anthony owned. Is there something similar like that that can happen in the future, you think? Is that going to be a trend, you think, or is that more common? I've not really heard of that happening in many organizations.
It's not unusual for a museum to sell something, like if they have a beautiful stained glass window or a particular art object or something that is really their trademark for that particular museum. They often will market it. Not so many of those things. They're more likely to be a painting or a window or a sculpture. But this is something you can wear
Sure.
and take with you. Susan B. Anthony had two things that were her trademarks. Her red shawl, which was very characteristic, which actually was given to the Smithsonian when she died, and then her alligator purse.
I see.
And lots of people know, there was a whole jump rope rhyme about the alligator purse. And lots of the visitors to the house know the jump rope rhyme, but they don't know the significance of it. I could...
You want to tell us about it?
Do you want me to?
Okay.
Sure, I'll do
Right.
So Miss Susie had a baby. She called him Tiny Tim. She put him in the bathtub to see if he could swim. He drank up all the water. He ate up all the soap. He would have swallowed the bathtub, but it wouldn't go down his throat. Call for the doctor. Call for the nurse. Call for the lady with the alligator purse. Mumps, said the doctor. Measles, said the nurse. Vote, said the lady with the alligator purse.
Beautiful. Very nice. Thanks for sharing that.
We think it dates to a time when she had the purse in California. But today, kids still know the rhyme. They usually don't know the vote, said the lady with the alligator purse. That began to be lost after the passage of the 19th Amendment. So we hear lots of different ending lines, but then everyone suddenly, as they're looking in Susan B. Anthony's study at the actual original purse, they're like, oh, that's the connection. That's where that came from.
Oh, that's lovely. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. We're going to take a quick break here. My guest is Deborah L Hughes, Executive Director of the Susan B. Anthony House, and we're talking about a purse with a purpose. We'll be right back.
Living green means reduce, reuse, and recycle, including those old rechargeable batteries and cell phones. Call toll-free or visit calltorecycle.org to learn where you can recycle your old rechargeable batteries. Remember, if it's rechargeable, it's recyclable.
And we're back. I'm Nannette Nocon. This is It's About Money, and my guest today is Deborah L Hughes, and she is the Executive Director of the Susan B. Anthony House, and we're here to talk about a purse with a purpose. Thanks again for being here, Deborah.
Thank you so much, Nannette. It's great to be here.
So tell me about what is the purpose of the purse, and what are you going to do with the money?
Well, we mentioned that our trustees most wanted to close a deficit for this year, and knowing about our economic times. And so the first $100,000 that we would raise from the purse would close that deficit for us. The next $100,000 will go in the bank to get ready for next year because we don't see a great change happening in the short term in terms of the economy. And then the initial funds that we might raise through this bag, we want to put into our national membership program. We know that we have people who are members from all around the country and some from outside of the country, but we've never actually promoted very much our membership. And we think that that's the way to really stabilize the financial support of the organization in the future. Most of our support now comes from Rochester, and that's important and wonderful. Susan B. Anthony is Rochester's own. But we're for a house museum of the international significance that we have, we know that we want to broaden our base. And so one of the most challenging pieces about getting people to become a member of an organization is the acquisition. It's that outreach. And whether you do that through social media or through the internet or through direct mail, there's an acquisition cost up front for that. And so we will fund that project. And we already have some specific targeted audiences that we've started working with. A great example is nurses. Susan B. Anthony was a marvelous champion for the profession of nursing. And because nursing was so important to Susan B. Anthony, we are developing curriculum and resources that promote and support nursing today. So it's a continuation of her legacy there.
What made it important to her, you think?
You know, actually nursing was a profession for women that developed in the 19th century, particularly around the tremendous need during the Civil War. Dorothy Dix was involved in that, and she was put in charge of nursing and taking care of the wounded, but she had no authority to order the men around who were supposed to be supporting that. So that was a whole interesting dynamic. And Clara Barton, who founded the American Red Cross, was a really good friend of Lucy and Susan and Mary Anthony's, and she was a suffragist and was from Dansville, New York, right here. And so there were a lot of, as this profession of nursing was developing, moving from when people took care of people in the home, and it was more of a servant function of taking care of the needs of the body, to medicine developing in the 19th century, and learning that they could offer specific skills around sanitation, around wound care, around caring for people that required education. at the same time in the 19th century, education began to open up for women. It wasn't available when Susan was a little girl unless you got private tutoring and were of a certain economic class. But Susan's father had made sure his daughters got as much education as his sons. But by the middle of the 19th century, colleges were beginning to open and women could have education. So the women of the 19th century, saw nursing as a profession that they could push as part of the feminist agenda. And they called it that even then. To say, here are women who are working in a profession that requires training, that you can respect and that you need, and let's elevate that in society's eyes so that women can be seen as professionals who can do a job well.
I see. So trying to promote membership among that population because it was important to Susan B. Anthony.
Yeah. And in 1902, she actually, Susan B. Anthony was 82 then. For anyone who's thinking, what should I do with the next half of my life? Susan's a great example of community involvement. She took a break from suffrage and she attended the New York State Nurses Convention. And there, they brought her in to be the keynote speaker because they were proposing that nursing would have to have licensing and registration in New York State. And she was all for that because she felt that would elevate it to the same level as physicians.
Yes.
And so she was the keynote speaker, and at the end, she stayed all day. She went to all the sessions, spoke twice, and at the end, they voted to push legislation in New York State that became the Nurse Practice Act. And in 1903, New York State adopted the policy for how to train and license and register nurses. And Susan B. Anthony is considered a key proponent of that whole change in our state.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
My goodness, it didn't stop in all the other...
That's one of the fun things. What we're discovering is when we'll ask a question about Susan B. Anthony, and we learn so much more. She was involved in way more than we know, and there's a lot of primary research that we're doing, and it's very exciting. People are just often saying, did you know this? And we'll look into the archives then, and we'll discover something we hadn't, we just hadn't pointed the microscope that direction to find that. And nursing is one of those very exciting direct connections for her.
That's great. That's great. That's great. So the Purse with a Purpose, like I said, serves three purposes.
Yes.
And ultimately, the major purpose of it is to try to promote the house so that it's self-sustaining on its own.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's so on mission. The purse has two adornments that are related. When you turn over the logo, the Abigail Riggs logo, you'll see every woman needs a purse of her own. The quote from Susan B. Anthony.
Yes.
And there's a plate on the outside of the purse that says failure is impossible.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
That is another beautiful quote of hers, isn't
Yes,
it? That failure is impossible.
Yeah, that was her last quote from her most famous speech when she was 86 years old, which she made in Baltimore at a women's convention. And then she had pneumonia and came home here and then died in Rochester 3 weeks later. So here, here's a woman at 86 who's made her most famous speech ever.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And a line that would not be forgotten.
Yeah.
That's great. No, there's also another fundraiser that the Susan B. Anthony House is doing.
Yes.
So tell us about that. I think that's a lot of fun.
You're talking about the Send Susan Home campaign.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. 830 million Susan B. Anthony dollars were minted by the U.S. Mint, and they actually launched them from here at the house in Rochester. They thought that was the most appropriate place in '79. The dollars didn't become very popular as currency. There aren't enough trays in a cash register to have a dollar slot, and they were the same size and shape as a quarter. So most people put them away and kept them as keepsakes. Now, if somebody wants to keep their Susan B. Anthony dollar, we're excited about that. But if she's sitting on a shelf or gathering dust, that's the last thing that Susan B. Anthony would want. So we're inviting people to send them home, and where we will put them to use to share about her history and about her cause and to take care of the house.
That's great. That's phenomenal. Everybody can just give up their Susan B. Anthony dollar. And
it's been beautiful. The response, we've had hundreds of people respond $1 at a time, and some powerful stories. One woman sent us a card and said, this is a Susan B. Anthony dollar that survived our house fire a number of years ago. And when we turned over the Susan B. Anthony dollar that was taped to that card, it still has the smoke on it. Another person said, my husband gave me 25 Susan B. Anthony dollars as an anniversary present. You can't have them. Here's a check for $25 instead. So people have been coming and telling stories. A woman recently dropped off a number of Susan B. Anthony coins that were her husband's, and her husband had died, and she said, I think he would want you to have these. So they've been very personal, moving stories as Susan's come home.
Oh, very nice. What a great program.
Yeah.
Just the Susan B. Anthony House has all these wonderful ways to help be independent, come up with ways that are already there. No, is there another dollar with another coin in there?
The other woman on the dollar is Sacagawea.
Okay.
And Zachary Taylor made it onto a dollar coin as well.
Okay.
And we've had people who've sent us cards with all three of them.
Oh, how nice. Well, that's
it was
great.
lovely.
You welcome them too.
We do. We've had some first edition Susan B. Anthony dollars that have come, which have additional value.
Yes.
So
terrific. So that campaign will continue, and
we're going to keep that one open until 830 coins have come home.
Yeah, that's great.
Or you can ransom. Someone said, "Well, you can't have my Susan B. Anthony, but I'll ransom Susan with a George or a Hamilton." Or
oh, okay.
We're open to that.
Yeah, sure. Anybody can come home and visit Susan B. Anthony's house,
exactly,
and they can stay.
Exactly.
Yeah, and the more the merrier. That
Absolutely.
is, right?
Well, that's
great.
I mean, that's what we want to do, is tell the story.
Yeah.
So if it connects people, that's exciting.
Yeah, I think it's exciting. I mean, there's so many wonderful quotes and really meaningful quotes that she had said, including that, failure is impossible, that every woman must have a purse of her own, and just, of course, the causes that she had championed are just so important in our history today. And I thought that's one of the reasons why I wanted you to come in and talk about it, and then the purse with a purpose being that it's so beautiful. I didn't realize that they had put all those different significant items in the purse. So then the purse can be something that people can own, give away.
Exactly, and we hope it will be something that people will, it's a way to tell the story. If someone's given the purse who doesn't know about Susan B. Anthony and the Susan B. Anthony House, and they learn something and then they share that with their friends, then that just makes it just spreads further and further.
Mm-hmm. And then you're launching also a national campaign with this, right?
Yes, that's correct. We, as soon as we have all the bags delivered and ready so that we could ship them out, then we're going to look to get some national exposure on television, and hope that we can spread virally through social media, so that we can get Susan B. Anthony out of Rochester again.
Yeah, that's right. That would be nice. So we'll send the purses out of Rochester,
yes,
but we'll collect the coin comes back.
Perfect. That would be ideal.
Yeah, they can send a bunch of coins and a check for the purses as well. Yeah. So that's great. Well, is there anything else that you want to mention about the Susan B. Anthony campaign, the Purse with a Purpose?
Well, something about the house that people don't know. Okay. About half of our visitors come for tours that we have, and we're open from 11 to 5-6 days a week. Okay. But the other half of the people who come to the house come for our inspirational workshops. We actually do programs for all ages that are focused on inspiration, trying to get people excited about being engaged in their communities. So we do a whole series of programs for women in transition, who might be women like those who are at Sojourner House, who are putting their lives back together, women who are in recovery from addiction, who get great inspiration out of those 19th century women. Yes. We have a program for women who are veterans, who are in treatment in Batavia, veterans from Afghanistan and Iraq, who also identify with the perseverance of recovering long-term from a brain injury or something else. We have programs for school children. We have programs for seniors to think about, if Susan B. Anthony did this at 52, she got arrested at 86, she was speaking. We have a program on Susan B. Anthony, who's a great model for healthy aging. So half of what happens at the house are these inspirational programs.
Yeah, sure, and that's great because the message is so meaningful that you wouldn't want to just put it in the books and leave it at that. You
Exactly.
want to be able to share the message.
It's very personal. All of our tours are led by volunteer docents. We have 110 volunteers, and everyone tells the key parts of the story, and then also the parts that are most interesting to them. So it's a different experience every time you come.
Sure, so come more than once.
Yeah.
Bring your Susan B. Anthony dollars,
yeah,
and leave with the purse.
Yeah. And then about 40,000 people visit our website every month.
Nice.
90 different countries. And I just got a wonderful affirmation this morning from someone who said, I needed to do some research for a paper, and the website was so tremendously helpful. Thank you. She's from New Mexico.
Great, very nice, very nice. Well, thank you. We've run out of time. It's been an exciting conversation here. Thank you very much, Deborah L Hughes, Executive Director of the Susan B. Anthony House.
Thank you so much, Nannette.
And best wishes with the Purse with a Purpose.
Thank you.
And thank you, our audience, for watching us today. I'm Nannette Nocon. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for tuning in to today's show. If you have any questions for It's About Money, please email Nannette at nnocon@aol.com. This program was produced through Penfield Community Television in Penfield, New York.